session is also going to be recorded. And just let me introduce our two wonderful speakers this morning. So Audrey is the founder and CEO of Project Elect, a nonpartisan nonprofit organization that encourages women, members of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, to get involved in public service. She's also an election law expert with an expertise in experience, including working on the Romney and McCain presidential campaigns. She's worked for Congress, at private law firms in Washington, D.C. and California, and taught election law at BYU Law School. And she lives in Northern California with her husband and 3 daughters. And then we have Candace Anderson, who has served on the Contra Costa County Board of Supervisors in the San Francisco Bay Area since 2012. And she previously served on both the Danville and Morgan Hill City Councils. She's an attorney licensed to practice law in California and Hawaii, and began her legal career as a prosecuting attorney in her hometown of Honolulu. And she put her legal career on hold to serve the community and raise her family. She and her husband, Phil, have been married for 38 years and are the parents of 6 children, ranging in the age of 23 to 36, and have 4 daughters-in-law, a son-in-law, and 9 grandchildren. So I will turn it over to Ben.
Okay, and I think I'm going to start. I'm going to sort of tease you up with what it's like being an elected official, and then Audrey's going to tell you how to get elected. So it's all good. So I am going to share my screen and do a little PowerPoint for you. And this is a PowerPoint that I typically love to present. I update it. Some of you who have heard me speak before may have seen it before. So question I often get is, how did a Latter-day Saint mother of 6 end up an elected official in the fairly liberal San Francisco Bay Area? And so I'm going to just take you through my story really quickly. I grew up in Hawaii, and I love these pictures. These were my parents' Christmas cards. So no, we didn't live in a grass hut. We didn't ride a canoe everywhere we went or hang out in palm trees. We actually had kind of a normal, whoops, and I went too fast. Normal background. There's my 3 sisters. I have 3 sisters, and we just lived in a pretty normal house in Honolulu. And we then, what really made a difference in my life, excuse me, we're going way too fast. I'm having trouble with my computer today. What really influenced me growing up in the 70s was my mother. And my father is an attorney and went on to work as church legal counsel, but my mother was working on both her master's degree and then her PhD at the University of Hawaii in American Studies. And she got very involved in government, very involved in a church public affairs calling of sort of getting involved in the Hawaii State Legislature. And as a teenager, she would take me to many meetings, and it was a controversial time. My mother was very much a supporter with 4 daughters of equal rights for women, but at the same time wasn't a strong supporter of the Equal Rights Amendment, and worked very hard to come up with an alternate amendment that would address some of her concerns, the concerns of many church leaders as well. And I remember sitting in hearings in the Hawaii State Legislature, one distinctive moment, sitting on the floor, there wasn't enough room for everyone, and hearing these very articulate women speaking on the other side, and no one speaking with the same level of conciseness, directness on my side. And I just thought, why aren't there more women there representing my values? And that was just a little epiphany. I went on to BYU, started out as a music major, but instead ended up graduating with a degree in public policy. Same year I graduated, I was supposed to get married. I called off a wedding in May, took the LSAT in June. And back in 1982, BYU needed more women in the law school, and they considered a very, very late application. So I began law school at BYU in 1982, happened to meet my husband in law school. We got married in 1983 in Honolulu, graduated in 1985, and I actually did my last year of law school at the University of Hawaii because my husband had begun his practice of law in Honolulu. And so this was the big dilemma for me. And it was alluded to by Annette, and I loved her presentation today is, as women, we can do it all, but we can't do it all at once. And I was very fortunate that Elder Faust was speaking at BYU, my final year of law school. And if any of you have not read it, and if any of you know me, I'm always sending this very old talk to people. It's a message to my granddaughters. And he said in it, but my dear granddaughters, you cannot do everything well at the same time. You cannot be 100% wife, 100% mother, 100% church worker, 100% career person, and 100% public service person at the same time. How can all of these roles be coordinated? And he's quoting from a Harvard professor, Sarah Davidson. The only answer I come up with is that you can have it sequentially. At one stage, you may emphasize career, and at another, marriage, and nurturing young children. At any point, you'll be aware of what is missing. If you are lucky, you will be able to fit everything in. And that is what really guided my career. And I was fortunate to then go on to be sworn in as an attorney with my 2-week-old son. I worked part-time as an appellate attorney in the prosecuting attorney's office. And that's where, as Annette suggested, sometimes when you're raising a family, you just decide how you're going to do it. And you present this to an employer and say, this is what I'm willing to do. This is what I can do. But I'm not going to compromise what's most important to me, which for me always was my family, my children, my husband. So we moved to California in 1987, took the California bar in 88, hadn't planned to work, but met up with an LDS attorney who needed a little extra help. So I was working part-time practicing law till my 4th child was born, decided I really couldn't juggle both of them. And so put my law career on hold and got appointed to 2 city commissions in the city of Morgan Hill, which is just part of Silicon Valley, south of San Jose. After that, there was a vacancy, where on the city council. And I always say to people, if you want to get involved in local government, it's much easier to get appointed to a city council or another board than it is to get elected. You only have to convince 4 other people. I was fortunate enough to be able to do that. And I also tell people you help where you're needed. And right when it was time for me to run for my seat in Morgan Hill, my husband got a job offer in Walnut Creek, another great community. He had grown up in an adjacent town called Danville. We moved up there, and it was sort of, my political career or moving to an amazing community, and moving to an amazing community where we then had 5 children was really critical. And when I arrived, it wasn't, I'm the former city councilwoman, you must give me a great position. It was just, you figure out where you're going to be needing help. And so it was with Cub Scouts. It was in my children's school. It was at girls camp, finding opportunities to help and get to know your community. Came to a crossroad in 2003. My youngest, Sam, was starting kindergarten. My oldest was starting BYU. And there was another opening of an appointment to the Danville Town Council, which is their city council. Once again, I applied. Once again, I was the least objectionable candidate, as I like to say, and I got appointed. And it was a great opportunity that I got to serve in for the next 9 years. And then I ended up getting elected to the Contra Costa Board of Supervisors, which I have served in for the last 9 years. Fortunately, in 2016, when I ran unopposed, and also in 2020. I don't know that I will be that fortunate. It's been much more controversial the last 19 months with COVID, and just a varied reaction to what our health officers in California are doing. But nevertheless, it was a really interesting experience to run on a much larger campaign, one where on the back of a pencil, back of a napkin, I realized I need to raise a minimum of 100 to 150,000 to be successful, and a lot of money had to go into a campaign. So I always answer the question for people who say, well, why participate in local government? Well, you get to create the laws. You don't just respond to those passed by others. You're not trying to convince others that they should change their opinion on a matter. You get to be the opinion maker. You get to make decisions that affect the quality of life, housing, open space, parks, recreation, transportation, transit, fiscal responsibility. As a county supervisor, I sit on 28 different boards and committees on a wide variety of all of these issues. And you're able to really make changes in the lives of individuals. You get to identify solutions to problems, one of my favorite aspects, pass ordinances affecting health and safety. And little did I know with the pandemic how important that was going to be, and the powers that are delegated to a local health officer. And really, in a county level in California, you are the safety net, and you get to provide assistance to those in need. So I always love to say, well, where do you start? You've got to know your local issues. And I've got up here everything from social media to those local newspapers that you may just sort of throw in the trash. Take the time to read those, go online. These are some of the local publications in my community. Familiarize yourself with your city and county websites. You can sign up for alerts for any agenda at most cities and counties. And so you can keep track of issues that are important to you. Scan agendas, find things you might find interesting. Attend and participate in a commission, council, or a board meeting, when topics of interest are discussed. And when you do that, this is one of the best quotes I've in my political years, I've really valued. And this is obviously from President Hinckley. He said, teach those for whom you are responsible the importance of good civic manners. Encourage them to become involved, remembering in public deliberations that the quiet voice of substantive reasoning is more persuasive than the noisy, screaming voice of protest. In accepting such responsibilities, our people will bless their communities, their families, and the church. And I cannot tell you how often I need to say to someone who is advocating on an issue, it's hard to hear your message because you are not providing that calm voice of reason. And it's so much more effective if you're able to articulate it in that way. And with the pandemic, you might imagine I've received thousands literally of emails over the last 19 months and texts with different opinions of different people on the efficacy of our health orders. And, even last month, I got a very angry text from a member of my stake telling me that I was following Satan and that I was taking away people's free will, and it's one of those things where I thought that's not the most effective way of communicating, but as an elected leader, you have to respect that people come to you with very divergent viewpoints and concerns, and you need to be respectful of those. To get more involved, I always encourage people to get to know your opinion leaders. And I'm sitting there with the mayor of an adjacent city and the former communications director of one of our school districts. Sit down, get to know your city council members, school board members, the business leaders, presidents of service clubs and organizations, know the editors of newspapers, public affairs representatives of your utilities, agencies that are involved. And then go look on various government boards and commissions that seem interesting. Start reviewing their agendas, attend their meetings. And right now, where many boards and committees are still meeting remotely, it's a great chance to just pop in, see what they're talking about, see what the dynamics are, because not all commissions have a dynamic you want to put yourself in. Then identify these specific opportunities that you can be appointed to a commission or board. Most positions are for either a 2 or a 4-year term. And so you can go online to your city or county website, look at boards that are coming up, look for announcements. Oftentimes press releases are issued. Sit down with your mayor, council members, and just say, I want to get involved. Where do you think I would fit? How can I help our community? And here are my skills, my background. And then balance your family. And I think as Annette and Jenny were talking in the last session, for me, it was first, how much time do I have to raise my 6 children? Because I started doing this when I had 4 little children who ages 2, 4, 6, and 8, or actually commissions were 0, 2, 4, and 6. And now my family has expanded to 22 people. As I was mentioning, if any of you came in, I had my 2 granddaughters over there on the left who did a sleepover last night. How do you balance everything you're doing with your family and what else you really want to accomplish in your life? Consider getting involved in community groups, whether it be a service club, a civic organization, a veterans organization, a business organization. That's where you get to know people, you build grassroots foundations. If there's a community leadership class, these are very popular in California, where you can do a 1-year leadership class where you learn the ins and outs of your local government, your business community, your nonprofit community, and you get to build those relationships outside of your typical neighborhood church schools. Seek out good candidates to support in local, state, and national elections. And these happen to be 3 of my colleagues. 2 are former mayors of Danville. 1 is an assemblywoman, and we love getting together, talking about politics, step across the aisle, regardless of your political party. Down at the bottom, Steve Glazer is a state senator who I worked with when he was a council member in Orinda. we've got each other's cell phones. We can call each other when an issue arises. Run for office yourself. And when you do, incorporate the family. This was back in 2004, my first real political race in Danville, where my kids were walking around, Candace for Council, t-shirts throughout the community, walking neighborhoods. It became quite a bit of a family affair. And on a local level, these are manageable races that won't overwhelm you. There are ways to do it. And my races, I ran on about $10,000 to $12,000 budget. And I'm very happy. I always am happy if anyone is interested in running for office, shoot me an email. We can set up a time to talk about what worked for me. Participate in campaign training. And this is something that's invaluable. And when I started back in 1994, I went to my first campaign training when I thought I was going to be running for the Morgan Hill City Council before we moved. There were not a lot of trainings for someone who was a little more moderate. I was at the National Women Political Caucus, and they kind of said in a nice way, you're a nice woman, we like you, but your politics are too conservative for us. We'll never support you. But they did let me go to their training. And I'm so delighted that we have Audrey here to talk about Project Elect. I threw that into our slide presentation because I'm excited for you to learn more about what she's doing to help encourage women, members of the church who have our unique backgrounds to run. But I strongly encourage you to participate in a campaign training. And then when you run, you've got to identify your grassroots support. Who is everyone in your universe? Who have you touched? And volunteering in the classroom, sports teams, business associates, opinion leaders, all these people. And you just move forward. You develop a platform. You get your advisory body, as we sometimes affectionately call it, our kitchen cabinet. Endorsements, get them, your grassroots supporters, to help you with web design, social media. You need them walking neighborhoods, putting lawn signs in their yards, sending out dear friend cards to their friends, helping write letters to the editor. And the unfortunate part, raising money, because that's a critical part. And then you develop a marketing plan, establish yourself on the internet. I always encourage people, if you don't already, Google yourself regularly, see what's being said about you. Even if you don't think things are being said about you, they might be. Set up Google alerts, start securing domain names. Even if you're not sure that you're going to run for office someday, go ahead and grab your name. If there's a derivation of your name, for example, I spell Anderson, or my husband's family does, with an E-N, A-N-D-E-R-S-E-N. So although my website is supervisoranderson.com, I also have it spelled Supervisor Anderson with an S-E-N and with an S-O-N. And then just start your campaign. You've got to create a whole marketing campaign. And what print marketing are you going to use? If you're running for higher office, consider hiring a consultant and a fundraiser. Figure out what winning officials, who they use. You can save political flyers you like. You can replicate those or show those to your consultant or your printer of, hey, I'd like to do something like this. You can check campaign finance reports to see who people are using. Identify where you'll need a consultant. And so when I ran for county supervisor in 2012, I didn't hire a campaign consultant other than for some specific issues. When I was being attacked essentially for being a Mormon woman, mother of 6, who had supported Proposition 8 in California, which at the time was the same-sex initiative, and also I was not pro-choice as they would like to see me. I mean, the issue of abortion, I could talk all day about how there are so many nuances, but we're not going to talk about that here. And then talk to people who have run, find out who they've used, what worked for them. Then make sure you understand, fully follow campaign finance guidelines. This is critical. At the bottom right-hand corner is a good friend of mine, my former DA in Contra Costa County, who used his campaign credit card for personal expenses. He got arrested, he got prosecuted, and he resigned in disgrace. Be accessible to the media. And I cannot articulate this enough. Every time I have a reporter contact me, I give them my personal cell phone number. Make sure you identify which media outlets reporters are covering your community. Introduce yourself via email or in person when you're running, if you're elected. Like I said, give them your personal cell phone. Encourage them to call if they ever have a question about an issue. You want to be telling your story, not having someone else tell your story. When they call, answer the phone, find out if they're a deadline. If you don't know the answer to something, tell them you're going to get that information and call them back. And before a media interview, always develop talking points. And these are, you got to speak in sound bites, because very often, if you just have a long rambling narrative, very easily in a TV, particularly interview, they'll just take out what they want to support their angle of their story. And so you need to have your sound bites be the ones that are telling the story. Finally, I say vote. That's critical. And I say, I'm sure most of you in this room are registered to vote, but I cannot tell you how shocked I was the first time I ran for office when, as part of running, I got the voter rolls. How many people, in my ward whose kids attended school with my kids were not registered to vote. And I love this phrase on the bottom right. This is a movement in Hawaii, and it says, no vote, no grumble. And just sort of, if you're not going to vote, you sort of lose your ability to really complain about it because it's partly your fault for not voting. So that is my overall how I got involved, what I've done, and my advice to anyone who wants to run for office. And I'm going to turn it over to Audrey now.
Thank you, Candace. It's an honor to be on a panel with you. And I loved hearing your story. And that was some of the best practical advice on running for office I've ever heard. So that was amazing. Thank you so much. So let me start by telling you a little bit about my experience in politics. I've been working in politics for over 15 years, mostly at the national level. And if you work in politics for that long, you tend to get a little cynical. And I've certainly been guilty of that. I've been frustrated for years by the partisanship, the zero-sum game, the concerns of politicians and the media for quippy talking points over substance, and compromise in decision-making on all the difficult issues we face today. I started out in politics as this bright-eyed idealist, really wanting to make a difference in the world. And then in my first job, literally my first job out of law school, I worked on the Hill in DC for a committee, and my boss, while I was working for him, couple months into the job, he got stripped of his committee chair position and sent to prison because of his involvement in the big lobbying scandal of the day. And I found out that several of my colleagues had actually been wearing FBI wires the whole time I'd been working for them. And this was, months within graduating of law school. So I kept in politics despite that experience. I worked for the Romney and McCain presidential campaigns. I helped run a gubernatorial campaign in California. And in between and before and after all these campaigns, I worked at political law firms and represented countless politicians, candidates, campaigns, billionaire donors, corporations, on and on. And campaign lawyers, we know all the dirt. We clean up all the messes. And I've really just seen all the nastiness of politics. But like Candace mentioned, I recently started this nonprofit organization, Project Elect, to encourage Latter-day Saint women to get involved in public service. So that seems a little odd, right? Why would I do that? Why would I think it was a good idea to encourage more Latter-day Saint women to get involved in politics? It's a mess. It's nasty. It's the worst. So why would I start this organization to encourage women to get involved in this disaster? So let me tell you a story to kind of explain. One day a few years ago, a woman in my state called me up and she told me about some problems that she saw that were going on with the local school board. And she wanted my political advice on what to do. And I hate to say it, but I totally brushed her off. I told her there was nothing she could do. They weren't going to listen to her. There's too much red tape. I gave her all my defeatist, cynical views, basically told her just to give up. But she didn't listen to me. She gathered other Latter-day Saint women together and they all chipped in their own skills and resources to lobby the school board to get the changes they wanted. And what started out as just a few women members eventually grew and grew, and they brought in other community groups and ended up turning it into this incredible grassroots campaign. They got national media attention. It would have cost thousands of dollars in the political world. And these women put it together with no money, no political experience, and it really blew me away how effective they were able to be. So one day during this whole process, I was sitting in a school board meeting, and a woman got up who was opposed to what the Latter-day Saint group of women was advocating for. She was really angry, she was emotional, she was upset. And when she was done speaking, she went back to her seat. She was sitting by herself. There wasn't really anybody on her side that day. And I was sitting right behind her. And immediately when this woman sat down, one of the LDS women who was there, she left her seat with her friends and she came and sat down next to this woman. She put her arm around her and she said something along the lines of, "Thank you so much for sharing your perspective on this issue. Your thoughts really touched me. I really appreciate you telling us about your experiences." And watching that, I was almost in tears right there. Never in my almost 2 decades of working in politics had I seen someone manifest such a clear, genuine concern and compassion for someone who disagreed with them, for someone who was actively fighting against them, who didn't treat the person as an opponent, but as someone to better understand and befriend. I had known these LDS women were competent, that they were talented and amazing, but to see them in action in the political sphere, it became so clear to me what an incredible impact for good that these women could have in the political community. These women, no matter their politics, were embodying Christ-like love and leadership. And members of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, we know how to lead by lifting others up. And this is the type of leadership we're taught from a young age. We know how to work as a community to accomplish a goal. Service is part of our training. It's part of our identity. And public service is just an extension of that. And our communities, they need the type of leadership and service that Latter-day Saints and Latter-day Saint women in particular can offer. Church volunteer experience, all of the experience that we get serving as primary president, Relief Society president, teachers, gives most members unusually meaningful experience, developing the skills that you need for quality public service. So if only more faithful women would bring these skills that they have as listeners and gatherers and consensus builders and decision-making to the difficult civic and governmental questions facing our communities, I mean, don't you think we could make great progress in solving all these difficult problems we have as a nation? So that's the first reason why we need more Latter-day Saint women to be involved in public service, because our communities need us. And in particular, Latter-day Saint women with law degrees, we have so much to offer our communities. And then the second really, really important reason we need more members of the Church of Jesus Christ to engage in public service is because our church leaders have asked us to. They've really been clear in calling for more members to engage in political life. Over and over again, we've heard prophets and apostles telling us we need to be involved in our communities. We need to be serving. We need to be active in public affairs, educated voters. At Project Elect, we've been reading through church talks and church magazine articles, looking for quotes from church leaders about public service. And there are so many of them, from early church history to President Oaks's recent conference talk. This is something we've been told again and again that we need to be doing. And yet it seems like members, and especially women members, have overlooked running for public office. It's even in the church's general handbook, which says, church members are encouraged to consider serving in elected or appointed public offices in local and national government. And then President Oaks talk in April, where he literally said, we encourage you to run for office. And President Ballard said in a recent conference talk, church members, men and women, should not hesitate if they desire to run for public office. So I feel like that's pretty clear, right? We've been asked to be involved in public service. So more of us need to run for public office. More of us need to be involved in public service. And in particular, those of us who are attorneys, who have this precious legal training, we need to be leading the way in this effort. So why aren't more of us running? So there's this saying that's permeated women in politics commentary, and it goes like this. Women need to be asked to run for political office, and it takes an average of 7 asks for a woman to make a decision to run. And I don't know if that's scientifically proven or not. I kind of doubt it. But in my experience, it kind of rings true, right? Women need to be asked to run and know that people are behind them. And it seems like if most women need to be asked 7 times, Latter-day Saint women might need to be asked twice that many times. And if this is the case, we need to be asking women constantly to run for office. One of my favorite tools on Project Elect's website, and I'll show it to you in a minute, is it allows anyone to generate a certificate and email it to a woman that lets them know that they're already qualified to run for office based on their service in church callings, because so many times women feel like they're not qualified to run, that they don't have the qualifications needed. Hopefully that's not the case for anyone on this call. But I've been sending these certificates out right and left to all the incredible women I know. I don't know if I've convinced anyone to file their paperwork yet, but I'm going to keep trying. A lot of women are reluctant to enter the political fray given the current state of politics. I was talking about this at the beginning. I totally get that. It's a legitimate concern, but local politics isn't always as controversial as state and national politics. Maybe that's not true right now in the age of COVID, as Candace was mentioning, but pre-COVID and hopefully post-COVID, local politics can be relatively benign. These are usually nonpartisan offices. You're solving community problems. And you don't have to be a lifelong politician. You can serve a term or two and recruit and mentor someone to serve in your place. Think of how refreshing that would be in the political world. Second, it's hard, but LDS women, we really have the tools to rise above this negativity. We know who we are. If we're centered in the gospel and our faith, that can strengthen us when times get tough. We recently interviewed this county commissioner who had a great line about how she dealt with all of the negativity and anxiety in politics. And she said she prayed her guts out. I love that. And third, you're not alone. Think of the community you belong to, the people who surround you, who will support you and have your back. And then in addition, Project Elect is a place where we build up leaders, and we want to have your back too. We want to be a place where women can lift each other up. Women are so great at helping each other, promoting each other, supporting each other, encouraging each other. We're really focused on giving women the opportunity to come together and help each other. And our dream is that LDS women in a ward or stake will be able to regularly say to each other, hey, you'd be great to run for school board. I want to help on your campaign. Or I think you'd be a great mayor. Let me give you your first donation. Or you know so much about our community. Why don't you apply to be on the city planning commission? And these women will know they have a community behind them to support them and help them. And if good women and women of faith avoid politics because they don't like fighting and negativity, they won't have the opportunity to change the culture. And more women in office really can make a difference toward healing our political climate. I also know many women don't run for office because they're busy, and that's legitimate. We are busy. We have our families, our work, our church service, so many things that we juggle. But I'd ask that you consider public service as another type of valuable service you can try to make room for. The decisions you make in these public roles have very real impact on your family, your fellow ward members, and community members' families. I think people might have a better appreciation for the importance of local government after COVID. Where you live, the decisions your local government was making, they've had very real, very obvious impact on people's everyday lives. And certainly, and Candace was talking about this, and this is so important, women at certain seasons in their lives are probably more likely to have space and time to run for office. And I love that concept of seasons and doing things sequentially, because it means that although at some point in our lives, perhaps it seems impossible, in the next season, it could be achievable. And I hope women will look at public service through that lens, that even if they can't manage it right now, to keep it in their minds for the future. But Candace did a great job of it, talking about things you could do now, even if running for office isn't in your immediate future. All those boards and commissions she was talking about, those sometimes meet like once a month. It's really not that big of a time commitment. And so if you look into those, there's school councils, park and rec commissions, planning commissions. Those are amazing opportunities to get involved in your community, to have a say what goes on in your neighborhood, to meet and network with people, to serve others. You can also donate to someone's campaign. You can volunteer for a campaign. That's a great opportunity to learn more about the political process. And it's usually a lot of fun, probably even comes with some free pizza. You can also encourage women you know to run for office and apply to be on local boards. And know that serving in local office is not generally a full-time position. Depending on your community, it might take less time to be on city council than you spend being PTA president or Relief Society president. So it is possible to make room for it, depending on where you are in your life and how you can fit it in. So now that I've convinced you all that you need to run for office next year, I want to talk about some of the resources that Project Elect has available to help you do that. Let me share my screen. Okay. So all of our best resources are on our website. And I want to highlight a couple of them. Our website is www.projectelectwomen.org if you want to follow along. So it's our website right here. So first, sign up on the main page right here. Then you'll start getting our newsletter with all our events and updates and opportunities. Under the support tab right here, under training library, we have all of our past training sessions. You can learn more about Project Elect. And we have videos about public speaking, we have videos about fundraising, we have videos from elected officials talking about campaigns. And I need to get Candace on there because clearly she has a lot of great information. So Candace, you're next on my list to interview. And then under the support tab, also, you can find places where you can run or volunteer. You can sign up if you have political experience to mentor someone. And then resources tab right here. We have, Candace had a lot of organizations that do training. So we have lists of resources of organizations that have training programs who help support women. Some of them do women and men, some of them do conservative, some do liberal, some are nonpartisan. And so we kind of list them. So you can kind of say, okay, I'm a liberal, I want to do one that just does women. So maybe I'll go to Emily's list, or I'm conservative. I'm going to go to the Leadership Institute. And they have, you know, you can go to these trainings. A lot of them are free, or they have a nominal fee, and they have just a wealth of great training programs and things that will teach you so much about running for office. And they also have all kinds of resources that will help you do that. We also have some state-specific resources for Utah and California, and articles and other resources on just information on how to get started in running. We also have people who can help you. So if you tell us on these, when you sign up that you're interested in running, we will contact you and start talking to you and helping you and try to set you up with a mentor. And then I also talked about the certificate that you can make. So under nominate, you can literally create a certificate for a woman you know, listing some of her skills, let her know she's qualified now to run for office, because that's often why women don't run for office, right? They don't think they're qualified. They think that if they don't have the exact resume of a elected official that they've seen before, they shouldn't run. But this tells them all the skills that they have, and it's a great way to nudge a woman who might need a little encouragement. There's a ton more on our site, so feel free to explore. And finally, you know, follow us on social media, especially our Facebook discussion group. We post a lot of great content on there and you can keep up to date with our speakers and our training events and all the other stuff that we're doing. I want to end with a story. For the past few years, I've been working with the youngest young women's class. They're 11 and 12 years old. And because of the pandemic, we missed meeting in person for most of last year. And so when we finally started going back to church, the youngest girls didn't really have much young women experience under their belt. And in the new church program, the girls are supposed to be the teachers. And I love that our ward takes that so seriously. So we had the older girls teach a few times, and then the youngest girl, who had just turned 11 in December, and she wanted to teach after just a couple weeks back. And we encouraged her, but you know, we also had a backup lesson in case it didn't work out. But she blew us away. She taught this incredible full-length lesson. She asked questions. She engaged the other girls. She had an activity where she divided them into groups and handed these questions out. It was incredible. This little 11-year-old girl who literally had sat through 4 young women's lessons in her life at that point, with the confidence, the leadership, the poise, the public speaking and leadership skills to pull off a 40-minute church lesson. And I walked out of that room just in awe. I was just thinking, these girls are going to be unstoppable. The church has created this amazing program where we have adult mentors, but youth leaders, and they are getting such wonderful leadership, public speaking, planning, delegation, collaboration, decision-making training from such a young age. They're going to be ready to do anything. They're going to be beyond ready to serve in the church, but also in the public sphere. I have 3 daughters. My oldest is going to start Young Women's in January. And these girls in the church, these daughters of ours, they need us to lead, to set an example for them, to show them a world where they're surrounded by strong women leaders they can look up to and be mentored by. And I don't think there's a group of women more qualified to be those leaders, to be that example, than this group of lawyers right here. So I challenge you to be those leaders and be those women.